At the beginning of the year, there had been several cases reported on by all media in regards to drownings. Young men who were found in the Chicago River or Lake Michigan. Because of those cases and some happening within a short time frame, there was a lot of chatter and discussions online about whether any of these cases could be connected. Because there was some loose similarities, like I said, young men, the age range, and then the fact that they were found in the river or the lake. So many were theorizing, could this be the work of a single individual, a serial killer, if you will? We had been told adamantly that by Chicago police and by the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office that there were no known connections in these cases. But we wanted to look at the case files ourselves. I mean, these are very tragic cases for the friends and families of these victims. And many in the community were starting to be fearful about going out at night, going to bars, going to parties. And so if there was any connections here that weren't being thoroughly investigated by authorities, we wanted to know. I am going to the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office. The way that we went about this was really taking a look at some of these investigation files for these deaths. In a lot of cases, the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office had like a plethora of information. What we found is that, at least based on the investigations and the information produced as a result of these investigations, is no known connections for some of the cases. Some of the cases are clearly accidental drownings. In at least two of the cases, Chicago police investigators reviewed surveillance footage showing the victims walking to the lake, either falling in or attempting to swim in Lake Michigan very late at night and potentially too intoxicated. In at least one case, after reviewing that surveillance footage, that's how police and investigators ended up finding the victim, was going to the exact location where they were seen entering lake and then going to that location and finding their bodies shortly after. There are some cases, though, that have been ruled undetermined. All of these cases, the cause of death is a drowning. But the manner of death, it could be accidental, it could be suicide, or it could be homicide, or it could be undetermined. And in some of these cases, the drowning investigations were ruled undetermined, meaning that the victims' bodies were found, they had clearly drowned, but there was no evidence or information to conclude how they ended up in the Chicago River or in Lake Michigan in a harbor. No foul play was suspected, but it's still, there are a lot of questions and not a lot of answers for friends and families of these victims. So, we wanted to look at the numbers of drownings in Chicago to find out, are these drowning cases on the rise? Is this an anomaly? What's happening here? And what we actually found is that since 2018, the drownings per year have actually declined. But it's also important to note that about 34%, so more than a third of all the drowning cases since 2018 have been ruled undetermined. That undetermined status, meaning the medical examiner couldn't conclude, was this an accident? Was this a suicide? Was this a homicide? They didn't have enough answers to conclude that. So far this year, there have been 9 drownings, 5 of which were ruled accidental. There was also 3 that were ruled undetermined, and then there was 1 that was ruled a suicide. A lot of people online saying that, when they were walking out of a downtown bar, a bar in Chicago, or a party, essentially driver comes up and says, hey, I will give you a ride home outside of Uber or Lyft, outside of the apps. I can do it for cheaper. What we found with these cases is that, at least according to investigators, there's no evidence that any of these individuals had gotten into a car or needed a ride or were looking for an Uber or Lyft after leaving a party or leaving a bar. There was just no mention of that in the case files. The city's Consumer and Business Affairs Division basically handles consumer complaints. Complaints about unsolicited taxi offers, this kind of thing. It would either be reported to police or it'd be reported through 311 through the city's channels. And what they told us is that they have no complaints specifically about these types of unsolicited offers. They have had some complaints about fake taxis or taxis that maybe didn't have the right licensing to be giving those kinds of rides or permitting, but nothing that resembles this. But those officials also told us that this is not a new problem to Chicago. Chicago has always had a problem of unsolicited taxi companies, so it really kind of stands as a warning. I know for some it may be obvious, but when you've just had a really fun night and you could save a lot of money by maybe taking someone up on one of these offers, it's just best not to. It's dangerous. There's no accountability. It's just a good warning for consumers out there. The smiley face killer has been a theory that has been around for quite some time now. It's essentially, and there's been books written, there's been documentaries. This is the theory of a serial killer that leaves a smiley face looking, graffiti or, painting near the bodies of victims. Whenever you're talking about the potential of a serial killer in Chicago, the smiley face killer comes up because there have been some cases connected to here. In reviewing these cases, there was no documented ties whatsoever to this case. There was no smiley face drawings near any of the victims' bodies, as far as we know from what investigators concluded in these files. At least as far as we know now, there's no known connections or ties. I can't imagine what the friends and families of these victims are going through. I've talked to some, and they are searching for answers. And I think it's important for us all to keep that in mind and be sensitive when we're talking about these cases, that these are real lives, real people that were taken too soon. And sadly, we don't have all the answers as to what happened. Some of these investigations are ongoing. Some of these investigations are closed. It could be a long time until we get answers to some of these cases.